George are the only Beatle who had been in America before this trip. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Went to visit your sister a few months ago.
Yeah, September.
At that time, did anybody out there know of the Beatles?
No, I went into a record shop to ask if they'd ever heard of us, and they hadn't.
He's pleased me, when that first came out. And, because I had the album in Illinois for almost a year. And, telling everybody about it and telling the radio stations about it, and they were saying, that's not commercial,
It's been in every magazine, radio show in the world. The story about George came to America to visit his sister and went round the shop saying, have you got any Beatle records? And they're saying, what, get out of here. What are they, insects? And he came back to me and said, God, they don't know us, we're going to die, it's going to be such a battle.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
The Beatles first penetrated the US Hot 100 by proxy when, during a break in a 1963 British tour, Del Shannon booked a London studio and some session musicians for a cover of From Me to You, purely for the North American market. Further headway seemed an impossible dream when, in September 1963, George Harrison spent just over a fortnight at the home of his married sister, Louise Caldwell, in Benton, a small Illinois mining town. The first Beatle to set foot in the United States, he also spent a day en route sightseeing in New York, conspicuous only as another long-haired Englishman. As his face hadn't been plastered over magazine covers in the States as it had been at home, he was treated at Journey's End as Mrs. Caldwell's younger brother, some sort of musician, unrecognised, unphotographed and unpestered as he wandered the streets of Benton. How unexpectedly pleasurable it was to be a nobody again, not to have to steal into a cinema after faded lights had guaranteed shelter from the stares and approaches of fans. An interview on local radio and even a stage appearance with the Four Vests, Benton's boss group, had the impact of a feather on concrete, and Harrison was to return to Britain with a funny story about the aftermath of his night with the Vests when someone told him that with the right kind of backing you could go places. This judgment proved correct, and the next the good people of Benton saw of George was on the nationally networked Ed Sullivan Show the following February. Some would agree that the Beatles' success in this most vital market of all was because it was an antidote to the depressing Christmas that followed the Kennedy assassination. John Lennon's more forthright theory was that kids everywhere go for the same stuff, and seeing as how we'd done it in England, there was no reason why we couldn't do it in America too. Within months, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Love Me Do, Please Please Me and She Loves You had all topped the national chart. Even the B-sides of the first two made the top 40, though From Me to You, the one that had climbed highest of all before 1964, could only manage number 41.
Okay, ready? All, they're running.
Good evening, this is Bob Bartel, your host for Primordial Soup. And in the studio with me I have Danny Melkovich, who's my friend that I've met back in 1995. He's the publisher of the Benton Evening News, and we're going to talk about how we got to meet each other and then get into some other areas of his family. Going back to 1995, there was kind of a hoopla going on around Benton over the Beatle house, quote, the Beatle house, and your newspaper got involved in really getting the story out to the world press. And I know it brought in a lot of attention to the area, and a lot of media got involved. And tell me, you know, the reactions that you got from, you did surveys and different things, and you met some of the people, and the congressmen and the senators and all that.
How we got involved in the controversy was the state of Illinois, in all its infinite wisdom, decided they wanted to expand the local Department of Mines and Minerals building. And it's kind of funny to me because there's not an operating coal mine now in Franklin County nor in much of southern Illinois. So naturally the state would want to expand, and their expansion included tearing down a house formerly occupied by Louise Harrison-Caldwell back in the 60s. Her husband worked for one of the coal companies, and in the mid-60s her brother, who later on became a kind of a musician of note, George Harrison, visited his sister, spent the summer in Benton, played guitar in a couple bands, and it was at a time where the Beatles, you know, had become popular in England, and that very next year they became popular all over the world. And I'll never forget Lane listening to KXOK radio, and Johnny Rabbit, he had hourly updates on the Beatles. Louise she would call in and had a little, like a live update on everything that was happening in England. When they came to America, the same thing. But they're going to tear this house down, and we started, you know, a little push. Bob got involved and was the big push after he did, but we started getting some attention for it, trying to get it saved. And what ended up, the state was able to trade the house for some other property right there. And it was, the sad thing was the house was going to be torn down to be a parking lot. And
10 cars, I think.
Yeah, you know, and it's, I question the value of this particular building in the first place, and instead of going out, they went up with a renovation, and it worked out. And but it was hilarious that we ran a couple stories and tried to get the Associated Press involved in the story, and the correspondent at the time in our area basically blew us off. You know, he's full of crap. George Harrison, bull. He's never been to Benton. So you try to tell him, and they got in on it last. Some other media outlets picked it up, and then finally this guy came in one day, and it was everything I could do to keep from decking him. You know, I mean, what a jerk that we're going to make up stories about George Harrison and his sister. But Lou got involved and came back, and she's moved back into the area. And it, like I said, it worked out really well. It's now a bed and breakfast, and some real good people own it. And, you know, I wish them all the success in the world with it. And it kind of, we don't have all the industry and all the coal mining jobs and related things, and it's, you know, we have to capitalize on tourism, and that's as interesting a thing about Benton as there is.
Jim Muir came and did a nice story and did photography work, and then Senator Ray got involved, and it was a real community push, including the newspaper being involved with us. And obviously that story came to a real nice conclusion, and you know, the Benton Evening News was there. I noticed the other day on the internet that the Benton Evening News has you can go right into the newspaper now. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, we're online, have been for the past year. I've not been as good about updating it as what I should the last month. We have March is the most horrible month of my life. We have a progress edition that we do every March. We had a monster election this year, and the internet kind of took a back seat for a couple of weeks, but we're averaging 15 to 20,000 hits a month on it.
Wow.
But really pleased. It's one of those things that the company that owns our newspaper got us involved in it, and I decided, 6 months ago, you might as well make a good a deal with it as what you can, and try to make some money with it is just another part of the package. And I've always been hesitant on updating it. A lot of newspapers put their edition on at the time, but in a small community like ours, I'm worried about if you update it as it happens, why would anybody want to read your paper? We get some of that, but not much. We've been pretty good, and sports, obituary, the thing people out of town really are interested in. Most of the hits are from people out of town. Most of the people in town buy the paper.
How did your family get involved in the newspaper business?
They own the paper. I don't know if my grandfather won it in a card game or what happened, but at the time, in the 40s, it was passed on from his father to his uncle. His uncle was a lawyer in town and got shot in the back alley behind the newspaper. He was defending a client, and came from court, and the client's father, I think the son was accused of killing the father's second wife, and my uncle was defending the son. So during a break for lunch, my uncle came to the newspaper to update the morning court action, and the guy plugged him, and he died a short time thereafter. And then my grandfather ended up with it, and that would have been in the late 40s. So we owned it up until 86, I think December 31st of 86, and sold out to a larger concern.
Now back to 63, did you ever see George?
Past George one time. That's what I told you when I met you. It's Benton's had long-haired people long before long-haired people should have been popular. And past him, I would have been in the 6th grade. There was a restaurant on the square that everybody went to for lunch and after school. And one day crossing, it's about a block from the newspaper office. I went to school about a block from there, and passed him on, it'd be our South Main Street, at the corner there between the clothing store and the furniture store. Mm-hmm. And just passed him. And I had a classmate, though, that just really was, he was involved with him. He met him, and and George kind of befriended him, and so it was pretty hot topic of information when they became popular, because George Harrison, well, God, he was here.
Was that C.J. Paris?
C.J. Paris, right? Yeah, C.J. was. I'll never forget C.J. We played football. C.J. was the center, and C.J. couldn't play in some games because he had to play in the band. Oh. And, very musical, and C.J., I guess, was probably the original hippie in my class. But he was, he was our resident George Harrison expert.
And he's the one that helped George recover his wallet?
Yeah, I think that's the
town square.
Yeah. Yeah,
incredible story.
It was, like I said, 1963, but a guy wearing sandals, and it wasn't any, you think of long hair now, it was nothing, it probably wasn't as long as yours, but still yet, at that length in 1963 in Franklin County, Illinois, that was a big splash.
It was kind of crew cut country, wasn't it?
It's still kind of crew cut country, I drive a pickup truck, and that's the vehicle of choice.
Did your brother John get to see him?
John would have been about in the 5th grade, and I don't know what John was doing in the 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever. He's 2 years younger than me, and I don't know. I know we've talked about the Beatle house, and he knows all the stories, but as far as remembering seeing him, John was on his own little mission of seeing things. I think that was probably John's church singing time. That's when he was, they had a little church group, and they were involved. And then later on in high school, they branched out to a quartet or a quintet and took off through Southern Illinois singing at churches.
Now, your mom works at the...
My mom still works every day. Talked to her this morning, chewed her out a little bit. I figure, you know, if I don't think I'll outlast her, because her mother lived and worked into her late 80s at the newspaper and continued to work after we sold the paper for 3 or 4 years, and then had a series of strokes and had to be confined to a nursing home. But I figured my mom, who I lovingly call Frog, because one of these days she's going to croak, and I gave her that nickname back in grade school, you know, so she still hasn't, but she's 71 years old, and I probably owe her more vacation time. She's the only person at the newspaper that has vacation time at the end of the year. She'll fly to Paris, or she'll fly to Los Angeles, or she'll fly to New York, or she flew to Florida one year to see John or other members of my family. But she doesn't get sick. She doesn't, you think she's got, getting a little forgetful, then you remember back. This started when she was about 24, 25, and she's no different. She's just the same person she always has been, you know, and she never changes. She won our NCAA pool this year. She watches more NCAA basketball than anybody in the world. You know, I can't stand to watch it. Yeah. And I won the pool one year, but I think this is her 3rd time to win it. And that's beating the sports department, the news department, all of them. The old lady that writes the obituaries, she does a good job, and she's as knowledgeable as anybody you'd ever want to come in contact with. You know, I mean, she's got a psychology degree from Lindenwood College and has never worked a day in her life in that field. Oh. But that's the kind of person she is, you know.
Now, your family, your brothers and sisters, can we go through naming them?
Well, we'll go from the youngest. My sister Rebecca works for me at the newspaper. She's got a journalism degree from Southern Illinois University. Probably the only person in our building with a journalism degree, which kind of tells you the state of small-town newspapers. You know, I majored in accounting. Some of these other people majored in English. One of my sports editors is an English major at Eastern, who teaches English part-time. But Becky works for me. She's got 2 little kids, lives with my mom. Mandy is, I think, a legal secretary in California. She had started to, she was a graduate of Bryn Mawr, taught for a while in Miami, Florida, or Miami Beach, moved to California, has had some health problems. She's got some squirrely disease of the pancreas, that if the tumors are on the inside of her pancreas, she's the greatest person in the world and is only out $300 a week for medicine. If they come out, she has to have surgery. And I guess the last time she had surgery was in '98. She started that very summer, she started the UCLA Law School, which Mandy is the smartest person. She was a National Merit Scholarship winner and the smartest person I know, but she couldn't find her rear end with both hands. You know, I mean, it's just Mandy's Mandy, and you've got to love her, but you have to take it because you know it's going to come. But she was undergoing chemo and had to drop out of school, and now she's working for a big one of those 600 lawyer law firms, and she knows more than they do. She's the kind of person that, kind of like LA Law, you know, the legal secretary runs the show, and you just hope that the lawyers get to court on time.
Was she the producer for one of
No, that would be my next sister. Mandy's probably, she's got to be getting close to 40, and I'm the world's worst with ages. The only ones I know for sure are myself, John, and Melissa's the middle one in the family. She's exactly 5 years to the day younger than I am, because on my 5th birthday, when I was in kindergarten and when everyone else's mother was there to give a party, my mother was at the hospital giving birth to Missy, and I never forgave either one of them. We don't talk much. We probably are a little bit alike. She was graduated with a degree in communications at SIU, went to Mobile, Alabama, Birmingham, Miami, Florida, working in TV, news. She won I think a Peabody Award while she was at a TV station in Miami for a piece she did about drugs and gangs back before anyone knew there were drugs and gangs back in the 70s. She hooked up with the TV show West 57th Street, became a news producer. Her husband, Joe Starita, was the bureau chief in New York for the Miami Herald, so they moved there. She hooked up on that short-lived TV show. Then she went to work for Prime Time and was a news producer there. And then now she's they live in Lincoln, Nebraska, has a 16-year-old son. She was in town a couple times this past year, and her son's just a great little kid, not a little kid anymore, almost 6 foot tall, but good kid anyway. And she's out of TV. She met her match with Diane Sawyer. And then my brother, John, is an actor. He's currently in Madrid filming the movie The Dancer Upstairs, which is some kind of revolutionary spy thriller. He's producing and directing it. And he has a production company. He's been in a couple of movies in the past years and does a heck of a job. Good guy.
And the fellow that's from Springfield.
Yeah, Russell Smith. Russell is John's partner, has been his business partner from day one in the business. Russell was his roommate at Eastern Illinois, then they were apart for a year. Russell finished there. John went to Illinois State and met all the Laurie Metcalfs and Gary Sinises and Jeff Perry, who's in Nash Bridges, and all these people. They formed Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. They started out in a church in, I think, Highland Park. That's where they were when my wife and I were married in 1978, and we headed to Chicago, through Chicago on our honeymoon, stopped there for a couple days and saw John and all of them, and it didn't seem like much of a lifestyle. I was pretty happy that I was doing what I was doing.
And you're saying one Thanksgiving they were like...
No, more than one. A good Thanksgiving was a can of beans and maybe some ham in it. Those kids, I mean, they starved to death. I mean, there's no other... If you look at John's poster from Places in the Heart, that was filmed in either late 83, early 84 in Texas, and he was emaciated. You know, you look, they did, it's been on PBS a couple times, the play True West, and he and Gary Sinise both, that was a 1984 production, and that's what really got John started, and Gary also got noticed, and his career would 4 or 5 years later took off with Forrest Gump and the different things he's done. But they were emaciated. I mean, it was just horrible, you know. I mean, it was, you couldn't get them, they didn't have enough money to have a Thanksgiving dinner, and a really good Thanksgiving dinner for any of them that didn't live there and could go to their parents was a can of beans.
How did John go this way and the other part of the family went that way? I mean, what was there an actor or something bugging the family?
No, it was a squirrely deal. You know, I mean, it was, we were the original dysfunctional family, and always was doing something. I said earlier about John being involved in the church group. I'll never forget, he was the treasurer of BYF, which was the Baptist Youth Fellowship, and the money was missing out of the bank bag. And my dad, who at one time was director of conservation here in Springfield, and he was pretty strict disciplinarian, you know, he would beat you in the back of the head with a wiffle ball bat if you needed it, and I'm not saying we didn't need it, we did. So you know, I mean, all the people that always are abused and have, you know, problems with it, we needed it. It was a hard-headed bunch of people, my brothers and sisters, but the money was missing, so he lined us up, and he, okay, Danny Thief, do you have the money? And just, he was infuriated. No, I don't, you know, and I'm not saying I didn't take money, but not from the church. John, did you take the money? No, you wouldn't take the money. Missy, would you take the money? No, I don't have the money. And Missy was obstinate, and she wouldn't have done it. Mandy, did you take the money? And he'd shake her. No. And it wasn't, you know, a violent shaking, but he'd shake her. And got to Becky. Becky, did you take the money? And he shook her, and the money jingled in her underwear. She had stolen the money. And so, yeah, we were a weird bunch, and probably still are. You know, in many circles, people would think it, but he followed a girl at Eastern. I mean, he started up there and took up with a girl. She was in the theater department, and that's how he got into acting. You know, and then after he got serious into acting, he transferred to Illinois State for a senior year. And John, you know, you go and you graduate, or you earn enough credits to graduate, but they put John in a room for 20 people that had 60 people in it on a warm Bloomington day with no ventilation, and halfway through the Constitution test, John decides, see ya, and walks, and has never, I don't know that he's ever been back to Bloomington, you know, but he kind of figured anybody that'd make a guy take a Constitution test in a small room to graduate, and I don't know that a theater degree would earn you anything anyway. It wouldn't, whether you've got the degree or don't have the degree, I don't know that would make a dime's difference in your life unless you're going to teach it, and then you'd have to have the degree.
I think a really revealing interview was on that PBS when we were talking
Charlie
about
Rose, sure.
And it's a John that I never did see before. I mean, of course, when you go to the movies, you see the actor. You don't see the person. And I think that was really a good interview. That
it was. It was. I know he was very, very tired looking. He'd been out on a publicity tour for the movie, being John Malkovich. He'd appeared on Letterman earlier that evening, and then went straight to Charlie Rose, and he just really looked tired. And that's him. You know, I mean, that's how he is in real life. He's as good a guy, a great a father as you'd ever want to see. He's got two of the neatest little kids. He and his wife do. They live in the south of France, and they moved there because of the kids, because he was, I guess, when Louis was born was about the time of the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. And John's house was one of these old looking mansions that in the oldest subdivision in town. It was, shoot, I can't think of the name of it, but it wasn't very far from where the riots were, 3 or 4 blocks. And, you know, it's city blocks, so it's a, you know, it might be 1.5 miles or 2 miles, but still yet, he didn't want his children to ever feel threatened, you know, I mean, and it wasn't a good situation there. You know, it's one of those deals, you might have to work there, but you sure in hell don't want to live there.
What would you say would be a really good movie that John, his acting skills really showed?
Of Mice and Men, I mean, he's made so many of the doggone things. Probably my favorite was the first one he ever did, which was The Killing Field. It came out second. He filmed The Killing Field in Thailand, Places in the Heart, came back to it in Texas, and that was all in 1984. And they came when we were in New York in October of that year, watching him in Death of a Salesman. He was in the New York Times about 3 different ways. You know, he was directing a play off-Broadway that Baum and Gilead, which had a great cast of people that no one had ever heard of, and now there were the Laurie Metcalfs, Stephen Bauer that was in a movie, Thief of Hearts. I think he was in Scarface. He was Al Pacino's sister's boyfriend that they killed.
The Iron Mask.
And that was another good movie John did, Man in the Iron Mask, that I enjoyed. My recent favorite's Con Air, and it's the kind of movie that I hate. You know, I don't like action movies because it's not action, you know, but it was really good. And if Nicolas Cage hadn't have played the lead as Forrest Gump, well, how you doing? You know, I mean, it's just really stupid the way he came across, and he's not that kind of guy. You know, I mean, I've never seen him play that role, and it was him. You know, I mean, it wasn't the way the part was written, but I think it would have been a much better movie that way. But John was excellent in it, because I saw some of my dad coming out when he was playing Cyrus the Virus.
You really appreciate John's.
Yeah, you do, and it's I appreciate him more and more. Doing TV, you know, before a live audience, you know, I mean, some of the things he comes up with on David Letterman in front of an audience are really, really funny, and at times, you know, like the Charlie Rose interview was a great interview, but he's not performing. You know, a lot of the times on TV, he's performing. You know, those people, anytime you get 2 or more people together, they're on. Real live actors, you know, and it's, I've had some good times with them because that doesn't impress me a great deal. You know, actors.
You've been around them.
Oh.
Name some of the people that...
Well, we started out, Dustin Hoffman. My most recent was Johnny Depp and Kate Moss at a play in Chicago John did, The Libertine at Steppenwolf. And the night before, Nicole, we couldn't get there on Friday night. We took the train up from home, and there were 6 of us, and had seats, you know, for the theater, and had 8 seats. One of the couples didn't. They were in Chicago on business, and we couldn't get a hold of them. We didn't know where they were staying. So I turned 2 tickets in, and I knew Johnny Depp was coming, and I kept looking. Steppenwolf's not that big, you know, before the show started, and they dimmed the lights. So I'm looking around, and they dim the lights, and I look around and say, hey, you know, that bitch, he probably blew it off. You know, Johnny Depp, he's a big-time operator. Well, here comes a guy in with his little girl. Mm. And I'm thinking, in this play, I know pretty much how the play was going to go. And I kept thinking, boy, this is kind of risque to bring a little girl. What's this guy thinking of? Mm-hmm. Well, at halftime, everybody that was with me went out and smoked cigarettes or stretched. I sat down there and I scanned the crowd, never saw anybody. They flashed the lights, people come in. God dang, this little girl's up kind of late. I can't believe this, you know, that somebody would bring their daughter to a play like this. And I'm sitting to where I'm just, you know, it's out of the corner of my eye. I got, and after the show was over, we let everybody clear out. John's got to go clean up, and we're going to go across the street to dinner. And if Johnny Depp showed, you know, he was going to come with us. And I look around at one of my friends, and I said, guess the guy didn't show. Mm-hmm. And he looks at me, and he says, you dumb SOB. He's been sitting next to you all night. And the little girl was Kate Moss, who's a famous model. And we go across the street, and Johnny Depp says, you know, his family did some time in western Kentucky, and I think it was his grandfather, he told us, that landscaped Interstate 24. So, you know, Johnny lived in a trailer court in Owensboro, Kentucky for a while, and then they moved to Florida, and you talk about just a wonderful actor and a great guy, great personality, but he's no different. I've met Michelle Pfeiffer. She spent some time at the house in Benton a week after they filmed Dangerous Liaisons, and John used to make fun of her as Orange County Trailer Crash, you know. She used to work at one of the, and I can't, Ralph's or whatever the grocery store is, and the big grocery store chain in California. She was a checkout girl. And make fun of her, you know, I mean, you know, she's not very talented, she's not very pretty. Her sister Dee Dee, who ended up in, what was the TV show, it was a CBS show, and I can't think of it, and she had a supporting role in it, and was a very pretty girl, but nowhere near as pretty as Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer was just as, you know, every down-to-earth, common as anyone you'd ever want to meet, and most of them are like that, you know. I mean, there have been some. John Cusack was in Being John Malkovich, and we walk on, John's up the hill doing his rolling down the hill, and this guy walks up in a Cardinal baseball cap, and I didn't have a clue, you know. I mean, Cameron Diaz is sitting in a director's chair 2 seats from me, but she's colored her hair. She's not something about Mary. Mm-hmm. She's some hag that needs to fix her hair. But she had, you know, kind of dressed down for this role and didn't look anything like it, you know. But Cusack comes up, and I was pretty impressed because he had a Cardinal cap on, and Mark McGwire they played in Florida that day, and he hit 2 home runs, and I said, oh, McGwire hits 2 more. Well, he's a Cub fan. He's a stinking Cub fan, you know, which I'll never watch another one of his movies, you know, after I found out. But a great kid, you know, I mean, it's just, but you grow up with, all from the time, you know, 1972, John graduated from high school, and then 4 years later he's done at Eastern, you know. Still the most famous person from Benton that ever went to Illinois State was Doug Collins, the basketball player, and we lived probably 3 houses from Doug. Doug was at the house, and we had this great big old house, and it had hallways and little mantles at each end of the hallway, and we turned it into a basketball court with socks. And Doug and John would go into these just horrible games, throwing each other into the benches and at the corner of the arched doorways, and just play until you puke. You know, I mean, it was you were just totally given out, and I could never beat him because John had a tendency at an early age to figure out that it's his game. You know, it's Malkovich Arena. He makes the rules.
I remember one little story you told me when he came to Benton, and he had a convertible or something, and his agent would be calling him, and then he'd have his cell phone, and it'd be like, you know, constant, I want this, I want that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you cannot believe how his time is spread. You know, he's not the kind of guy to carry a cell phone or a pager or anything. You know, when we were in California, he it was glued. Either the fax was going off, he'd walk by the fax, hey John, here's a 48-page fax of some, you know, something Russ has sent him, or, you know, Russ is at maybe the office 6 blocks away on Wilshire Boulevard. They have the movie, or the building has been in several movies, and I can't think of the building right now, but it's the corner of Wilshire and one of the deals that runs that way, and they'll fax each other from the house 6 blocks away, you know, and it's just his agent calls, you know, I mean, it's just time consuming, you know, I mean, you never have any free time. We'd be out at dinner, and, you know, somebody'd call, he'd say, I'm not going to answer it, gotta answer it, and, you know, I mean, some of the most inane questions that they want answered immediately. Mm-hmm. Then he played a little bit of keep away from well, the head of Miramax. I was talking to you earlier about that. You know, the guy wanted him to do a publicity tour for the movie The Rounders, and John just didn't want to do it. You know, he wasn't that crazy about it, and he had tried to get Mr. Weinstein to produce one of his movies and couldn't get the time of day. Oh. But then when they want something for you, you know, they hound you incessantly, and he wouldn't do it, and he finally answered the phone on one of the 20 times the Miramax, you know, people had called, and, you know, basically blew him off. And I mean, he'll probably never get another movie filmed by the biggest studio in the world, you know, but still yet he does okay.
What does he do to relax, or what is
what you and I do? I mean, his deal, he's got a home in southern France. It's a 300-year-old carriage house that they haven't lived in. They've had it for 6 or 7 years, but they hadn't lived in it the last 2 because it's under constant renovation. You know, John's a renovation nut. I mean, Nicole always laughs, you know, you don't know what he's going to be doing, but you know he's going to be doing it. You know, I mean, somebody's going to come in with a hammer at some point in time every day, and he always gets the kind of contractor that is not going to get done on time. Oh. And where they live in France, they're 22 miles from the nearest village, which is an hour and a half from Marseille. So it's, skilled workers are not exactly cheap. They're not exactly abundant, you know, so you got to take what you get. And John always gets the one that's going to give the most trouble. This latest renovation was like 1.5 years. They turned, the first one was 1 year, then the last one was 1.5 years. They turned the upstairs into 6 bedrooms, 6 baths, because they have people from the States coming all the time. I fought that urge off. I have no desire to go there.
Does your mom fly over there?
She has been there to see it. It's not something that, you know, I mean, like I said, you fly into, what is it? You fly to London, to Paris, to Marseille, and then he'll pick you up in Marseille, and you drive 1.5 hours on bad roads to get to this place. And, you know, she's been to California a couple times, New York, like I said, Florida. Whenever she wants to see him, she can see him. He comes to Benton occasionally. He hadn't been there this year. He was twice the previous 2 years, and then he was in Chicago in the fall directing a play at Steppenwolf, and everyone was supposed to go up there, but my business kept me from going up this time, because we would have, my wife works, I work, and as it turned out over Thanksgiving, we would have got to spend about 4 hours, but have to drive 5 hours each way to Chicago, and it just, I can talk to them on the phone, figure out what they're doing.
When this being John Malkovich, what was the awards for that? I mean, what was best screenplay?
Let's see, they were
Script,
best screenplay, best director, and then Catherine Keener was nominated for an Academy Award as best supporting actress. They didn't win. The movie was just a little offbeat, I think, for a lot of people. I never read one bad review until like 3 or 4 weeks after the movie had come out. I couldn't understand some of the strategy behind marketing of this film. It was in New York and Los Angeles for 6 weeks before it ever hit Chicago, and I don't understand. And then it was down around us for about a week and a half at a theater over Christmas break at SIU. You know, I mean,
didn't play in Benton though.
Never played in Benton.
Oh,
but I mean,
you got a theater. Why did you know?
Well, our theater, and they've changed it here recently, but our theater was one of those budget theaters that everything's about 6 months old, and they charge you $1.50.
Oh.
And the popcorn, all you can eat for $1, you know, and it plays to the market, and that's what people can afford there. But they've since gone back to late run movies, getting them early, and I don't know if anybody would have went to see it.
When John goes back there to see the family, nobody really bothers him?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big bother. You know, you can't go anywhere without, and you know everybody. You know, most of the people know John. His friends always come over. We always operate out of my house as the base of operations. And you've got to schedule his time, because you know, most of the people that want to see him, you know, don't think anything about calling me. And he always makes sure he sees his friends, you know,
that's good.
Kids he grew up with. I know some of them get mad because he won't come back for a class reunion, but if it was to me, you know, I mean, no one ever knows when these things are going to be, but if I had an opportunity to make $3 or $4 million or come back to Benton, you know, mail me the check, because I've not been to one of my class reunions since the very first one, our 5-year reunion. I had the misfortune of staying in Benton, and a lot of my friends left, and they don't come back often. We had one last fall, I think, and ended up with a class of 160. I think 32 people came, and of those 32, I don't know how many of them I would have wanted to see that I don't see every day.
Be interesting to get George and your brother back.
Yeah,
George Harrison and your
George.
brother.
I don't know, George. You know, I mean, it's so scary. When we were in New York the last time, went on a little mini tour. He was married the first time to an actress, Gwen Headley, and she's a New Yorker, native New Yorker. She was most recently, I think, in ER. Played 2 seasons ago. Played a pediatric surgeon that was the love interest of Noah Wiley's character. And she took us on I saw more of I was there for 4 days, but I saw more of New York in 15 minutes, and more about the history of movies in New York from Gwen in that old Fiat that I talked to you about. That, you know, we saw Chinatown, so-and-so scene was set here, where that headless, or that cooked duck with a head on it. It was there. Jackie Kennedy lives there. You know, just went about every street. You know, Wall Street's there. And I could pretty well tell you, here's where John Lennon got shot, and what we were talking about earlier. You know, the security problems. You walk out of the Broadhurst Theater and people mob you. And it was my wife and I, and there was really no reason for them to mob us. Snapping pictures and touching and screaming. Ah! Oh, it's his brother. And it's big deal, but you walk down the street, because he walked everywhere, and people, he can, and I got to where I can now. People on the opposite side of the street going the opposite way, you can just tell oh my gosh, there's John Malkovich. I'm going to go over and touch him.
Oh.
And, you know, you wonder, when are you going to go over and poof?
Yeah. Does he worry about those things?
No, I don't think that he does. He never has with me. You know, he's been very, very good about that. I mean, if it's a family moment, you know, he worries about it. It bothers him that somebody would intrude on his family time. You know, if he's with Nicole and the kids, or Debbie and I, and TJ. We went to Universal Studio, and a guy, we're waiting in line to go on a tour. You know, that was the greatest tour of my life, because every time, I love Disney World, and every time you go to Disney World, here's these jerks over on the side just standing there real cool, and you're out in the sun for 10 or 15 minutes in line, and all of a sudden it's your time to go, and these cool guys walk in front of you and get, you know, good placement. Well, I went on a trip like that, and that was the life. You know, I became accustomed to it at Universal, but a guy saw who he was, and John was on the phone, because he had an appointment with a guy and blew it off. He was going to take care of it on the phone, and was talking to the guy, and this guy kept getting closer and closer, and he had his camera, and he'd get it up, and John would catch him out of the corner of his eye and kind of move to where he couldn't get a good picture, and just playing games with the fella. But it does, it bothered me probably more than him when people come out and do the want to do the star thing, because it's, you know, hell, that's my brother. That's, you know, it's no big deal. I can't see the allure, you know, of John Malkovich. It's but boy, everywhere you go, the girls love him, the men love him, and it's just, it's kind of, you know, I like to sit back and watch sometimes how people react, and they always do. It's just, you know, I mean, to me, he's my brother. Why would you do it? But you sit and watch him with Michelle Pfeiffer. You know, I mean, it was when they were there after Dangerous Liaisons. We would go to dinner at a place, and you know, people that it was wild. People that, you know, coming up, and some of the requests, you know, hey, can we take our picture with you? Hey, can you get up? Yeah, sure, I'll get up from dinner. Here, don't worry about me, you know, I'm well fed. Go ahead and take my seat. Sit if you like to sit. But I guess the last time he and the family were there, we went to a restaurant, and we got there, and I thought it was kind of funny that here's one of our relatives that the last time I saw him was the last time the time John and Michelle Pfeiffer were there, because he shows up, nobody knows they're coming to town.
Oh, they just blow in?
Yeah, you get a phone call from Champaign. Hey, we're coming to town. You know, we're going to stay there a little while and then go our separate ways, you know, so. But we're at my mom's, because they come there, and they called when they got there and said, come over, so we go over. And a little bit later, knock on the door, and I know somebody saw the rental car there, and anytime a rental or a Cadillac's parked in front of my house, no matter who it is, it could be the trash man, people are going to, hey, John in town? You know, so one of my cousins came in, and his wife and two daughters, or daughter and son, who I don't ever remember seeing before, and one of them was probably 12 and the other one 13. I hadn't seen them since they were little bitty kids, but sitting there and go through the whole spiel, hey, and he looks over at this lady sitting on the couch and said, boy, I just loved your last movie. And she said whatever she had done that had been out the previous spring. And he said, no. And she says, another Michelle Pfeiffer movie, you know. No. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. That was the movie my brother's wife had been in, you know, and they were in the process of getting a divorce, and he didn't even know, you know, Michelle Pfeiffer from A Man in the Moon. And it's just like, but he was there at this restaurant, and his brother and his girlfriend were there, and some other people that I think, you know, vaguely know, and it was everybody he worked with at this hospital. He told them where we were going to eat that night. And you know, and the reason we went there, because I said on a Tuesday night there won't be 6 people at this restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, there were probably over the course of the evening it turned into about 300 or 400 because everybody was coming in. They'd call home for house coat and, you know, your hair up in rollers or getting your sweating pants. Yeah, I mean, he'd never been to this town in his life. It's a little town south of Benton, and my wife and I ate there all the time, and, you know, on Tuesday night, no one's there. But they have turned it into a, I mean, there's pictures on the wall now. We went back over there a week or so ago, and they, you know, I mean, people that you'd never imagine meeting, and have some of them even to the point of you would never desire to meet, have pictures, and he's always real good about that. I wouldn't be, you know, it, like I said earlier, you know, it offends me more than, he comes to Benton once a year for 3 or 4 days, and you've got X number of hours, and you're going to have to
pick wisely.
Yeah, pick wisely, and then we try to keep it kind of calm, you know, and they didn't stay with me this last time. They stayed, we put them up at a place at the Wren Lake Resort, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's April, nobody's staying out there yet, the tourist season hadn't started, and it ends up, hey, how's everything going? And I get a phone call from some people that worked at the resort. Do you think he'd like to do some photos, and we could use them in commercials? And I said, well, yeah, why don't you ask him to do that?
Yeah.
I said, tomorrow when he comes down to breakfast, ask him that. Well, hell, they were leaving at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I knew that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure he'd love it. He was gone by the time they went and knocked on the door. Well, he checked out. Oh, God, change of plans. Caught an early flight.
I'd like to see John back and George back and back to Benton. And
I think John will probably be back towards the end of the summer, because I know he's very busy with this project, and this is something that's consumed a lot of his time for the last 3 or 4 years. And you know, you call one day and it's on, one day it's off, and this has gone on every other day. And he's got another one, you know, I think I told you he had 15, he and Russ had 15, 16
movies.
Potential movies in various stages of production or pre-production, and you know, it's anymore. It's just a matter of getting the cash.
Looks like our time's just about out. Wanted to thank you for coming to Dean Williams' studio and doing this interview, and it's been really informative. We learned a lot about Benton, Illinois, Springfield's connection with Russ and your brother John and yourself and your family, and I really appreciate you doing this interview.
Well, thank you very much, and it's always a pleasure to see you, and this was fun.
I only did it once. The first take, you know. Now I've got it in my bleeding mind for remembering it.
I will have a cup.
With everybody here, appreciating the efforts that you see everybody sitting behind me who helped chip in and to save history. The fight was sort of hard at first because I couldn't really get the powers to be behind me, but then Jim Kirkpatrick, my good friend back here, and Mr. Ray, and associations of different people came to call me. Danny Malkovich from the Benton Evening News, the famous Malkovich family, John Malkovich, Danny Malkovich, they own the Benton Evening News here. They contacted me and said, well, you know, we all remember George being here, but I guess we forgot about the house, you know. I didn't forget. I mean, I saw Louise in '93 and '94 in Beatle Fest in Chicago, and her talking to, you know, the people, us fans, and she, you know, said, well, you know, I lived in Benton, Illinois, and I said, well, okay. So I'm a licensed private detective by profession, trade, former police officer. Part of my skills is to track down things, right? And also my wife sitting over there, we're huge Beatle fans. We probably got one of the best Beatle collections in the world at our house. So, you know, you just put 2 and 2 together. And I actually had an assignment here on December the 10th, 1994 to be at Franklin County, in Franklin County. And I wanted to take some time and go, as a private investigator, I know how to find people. You know, that's what I do, right? So I went to the library and looked up a 1964 phone directory. I knew Louise's last married name at that time was Caldwell. So I looked it up, and there it was, a 1964 phone directory. Gordon and Louise Caldwell, 113 McCann Street. So then that part of the puzzle, came together. Then from there, I went down to the house, and I saw, like, oh, that's a beautiful home, but nobody lived in it. And I thought, well, okay. The house next to it, same situation, a backhoe sitting in the back. I immediately thought, well, they're going to tear the house down, but why? It's like really great shape. So then from that moment on, the whole process of myself at that particular time was to do one thing, and that was to save history. And the Louise Harrison-Caldwell story, George Harrison story, the Beatles. And that was a mission that I was going to be on. And I wasn't going to let anybody hurt Louise's home, believe me. I would have laid down, I don't believe in civil disobedience, but I think I would have laid down in front of the backhoe. I was that serious about it. So to make the compressed time here and story-wise, I went to the Capital Development Board in Springfield, and I told them, I said, look, I'm a licensed private detective. I have film from Beatle Fest with Louise talking about being in Benton, living there. I also have a book or two mentioning George visiting his sister Louise in Benton. And I said, if I'm lying about this, take my PI license, which is given to me by the state of Illinois, shred it, because believe me, what I'm telling you, if you look at the title or the deed, it's going to say something to the effect Caldwell or something to that effect. It's not going to say Harrison, and if it said Harrison, it's still not going to make any sense to anybody because they wouldn't associate the Harrisons from Liverpool. So when I told them the story, they were like, oh, okay, So I had the Mines and Mineral people at first thought, they weren't too sure. They wanted to still make a parking lot out of it. And then from there, Steve Thompson from Preservation from the state of Illinois reviewed my film from Chicago. He backed my play, my story. And then Mines and Minerals, Capital Development Board, the state of Illinois, Jim Kirkpatrick, Mr. Ray, Louise Harrison, my wife, myself. We all managed to come down here, I believe it was February the 4th, 1995, and we put in a lot of effort with Senator Ray, who was leading the charge with us. Because I was told, if I don't have a political effort behind me, it'd be very difficult, even if I was one of the biggest Beatle fans in the world, So I said, well, I don't know any political people here, but, we're going to get the wheels in motion. So, in short, everybody came to rescue the house. The media worldwide showed up. It was the biggest thing since the Beatles hit the Cavern Club, right here in Benton. And I was like knocked out by it all. It's like Beatle fans from all over. And Louise came back and we saved the home, and it became the Hard Day's Night Bed and Breakfast. It was a lot of effort by a lot of people, but every time I come to Benton, they've given me an award from the city. Last time I was here in 2008 for saving, the George Harrison story. I'm back again with my wife Janice, who's also a big Beatles fan, and my dear friend Louise Harrison. And we're just here to help celebrate a lot of good stuff. Bill Furry from the state contacted me and other people of like mind, and this is the outcome of it right there is the marker. So I love everybody that's part of this event today, and I know George would be more than thrilled to share the same feelings. All we need is love, and I'm sharing that all with you today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. A Beatle filmographer, so we have to take a very quick poll. I want you to clap at your favorite Beatle movie. Pick one and clap. We'll see which one is the favorite of this crowd. Hard Day's Night. Help. Magical Mystery Tour, Let It Be. Probably a lot of them, if not all of them, shown on this very site, the former theater. I remember seeing them. I think probably a lot of people do, probably have seen all four. Want to bring on a friend of mine, Jim Kirkpatrick, the author of The Four He Was Fab, and he'll tell you about that, one of the four vests. And doing it, I like Beatle trivia just as you do, and we have a chance to either accept or maybe debunk a little Beatle trivia here today, Jim. Up until, I have always heard that after playing in Southern Illinois with the four vests, that up until the time they took the stage at the Ed Sullivan Show, that George Harrison had asked to be billed as the three Beatles and the fifth vest. Jim's going to tell us whether or not that's true or not. I hope you've read the book, and if you haven't, I hope you'll get it. I really enjoyed it. My friend Jim Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. I will say one thing. I know for a long time, when the Beatles got started, Gabe McCarty, could you stand up? Gabe's back there. Gabe was known in the Beatles circles as George Harrison's American friend. You know, as I look out on the Benton Square, I can see many reminders of George Harrison's historic visit to Southern Illinois. I can see the upstairs cab stand where a young C.J. Paris was working when he saw George lose his wallet, and he later gave it back to him. Down the street was the Barton and Collins furniture store, where George bought several record albums, one of which contained the song, "I Got My Mind Set on You." It's kind of ironic that he recorded that song almost 30 years later. And I can see George Harrison standing in the middle of the street by the courthouse trying to get a picture of an old Model T Ford. Yes, there's so many memories of George Harrison's visit to Southern Illinois. And this was just a few months before the Beatles reached international stardom. I would like to personally thank Bill Furry of the Illinois State Historical Society and Bob Ray of the Franklin County Historic Preservation Society for their work and insight in making this event possible. You know, when this effort first started, it's amazing, but we had gotten inquiries from Australia, Italy, England, New Zealand, and other countries around the world. So it shows the significance of this event. You know, 1963 was a year of many highs and lows. We saw the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. give his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And that was followed by the tragic death of 4 young black schoolgirls at a church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama. That bombing occurred the same week that George Harrison arrived in America. And then we saw the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. It was the Beatles who brought us out of the low that was created by the death of President Kennedy. And the Beatles were not just another musical group. They were and still are the greatest musical group in the history of rock and roll. And they made not only musical contributions, but cultural contributions as well. And that is what makes George Harrison's visit to Benton so significant. Many people here got to see a preview of the Beatles before the rest of the world. At one time, in addition to the Pope and Muhammad Ali, the Beatles were the most recognized individuals in the world.
I like to often equate George Harrison's visit to Benton to a visit that Stephen Foster made to Kentucky in the 1800s. Stephen Foster, who wrote My Old Kentucky Home, never lived in Kentucky, but he made an everlasting impact on that state. And such is the case of George Harrison with his visit to Southern Illinois and Benton. The stories of George Harrison's visit to Benton and Southern Illinois will outlive all of us, and his visit will become part of Southern Illinois folklore for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Three things to accomplish while I'm up here. The first is to read the proclamation I have here from the governor of the state of Illinois. This proclamation, Representative Bradley, I don't know if you had anything to do with this or not, but this is a proclamation that said, therefore, I, Pat Quinn, governor of the state of Illinois, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2013 as George Harrison Day in Illinois, in recognition of George Harrison's tremendous musical success, contribution to the entertainment industry, and today's historical marker dedication ceremony. There's a lot of whereases in there, but I don't want to share them with you, but you're welcome to look at it when you get a chance. And I'll give this to the mayor. The other thing one of the other things I wanted to say was 150 years ago in November, Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, a 250-word address that is known around the world. Abraham Lincoln had 8 weeks of schooling. He didn't have a degree. George Harrison was born in 1943. He was born into a very working class family. They had no heat. Is that right? The first years, they had a coal fire. When George was born in the middle of World War II, he didn't have much. He didn't have a great education. He did get to go to school. But his contribution is huge. It is huge. You all know more George Harrison songs than I did when I was last here. One thing, the most important thing I want to point out is that this marker is not about Benton. It's not about George Harrison. It's about something more transcendent. And what I'm trying to say is that it's about how art transforms the individual and makes you rise above your environment. It makes you rise above your city. It makes you rise above your state and your country. It takes you into the spirit world, which is where George Harrison tapped. That's the place he tapped for his inspiration. The art of this community, all these students out here, how many kids do we have? How many kids from Benton are here? Raise your hands. No kids from Benton. Here, one. I proud of one person from Benton today, it is you. I want you to know that in this town, Benton, great things happen. In great small towns all around the world. This could be the Athens of the next generation. This could be the cornerstone for the next century. That marker is a reminder to all of us who come through this town that you don't have to be rich, that you don't have to be brilliant, that you don't have to be successful in the worldly terms. What I want to think I share with you is that Lincoln said it best. He said, just put your heart into it and put your mind into it and you will not fail.
Hang on, John's just broken a string.
Right. Today is a very special occasion. I think that many of us learned much more about this house in a few hours than we ever dreamed of, and realized the national and international significance of the Harrison home. And there has been several meetings. We have met with the Illinois Department of Mines and Minerals, with the Capital Development Board, with the Illinois Historic Preservation, and with the local people here, the Chamber of Commerce, the local Historic Preservation Committee, and the city of Benton, and many others. And everybody realized the importance of saving this home. And when we contacted the Department of Mines and Minerals, Capital Development Board, they were very, very receptive and holding up, tearing down the building, which was originally scheduled to be done. And they have given us 30 days to come up with a plan of saving the building. We have talked about a number of alternatives and are planning to do exactly that, somehow, some way, that it will be saved. And the person I will be introducing here in just a minute will be talking about some of the things that might be coming forth. We've looked at different alternatives. One is to keep the house at this site. Another is to move the house to another site if we have to, rather than to lose it. But it will take money, it will take resources, and we will be pleading out to people, asking for money to help support this effort. It's a very important effort, and without any further comments, I want to introduce George's sister, Louise, better known as Lou Harrison, and Lou lived here for 7 years. Of course, George spent time here at this very site. At this time, it was a great pleasure to introduce Lou Harrison.
Benefit to the community, because this area, when I bought this house, and I've told this story, I bought it, the only money I had was a £5 note that my mum had sent to me and a $2 Canadian bill. When I arrived in this town, that was all the money I had. My husband went off to work his first day at Freeman Coal, and I went into town and talked to Ed Summers, who was a realtor. And he said, well, there's an attorney here in town, Lauren Lewis, has a house close in that he wants to sell. He's just built himself a house on the outskirts. He wants $12,000 for it, and would you like to see it? So I looked at it, you know, here's me with my £5 note, my $2 bill. So I went to the house, and I said, well, that would be nice, you know. And we went up. The manager at the bank lent me $500 to put down as a down payment. Lauren Lewis set the thing up that it was going to cost $150 a month at 5% simple interest. None of this compound stuff. And we moved in that same day. The people from the area came up with pickup trucks with sleeping bags and camp cots and a stove and a refrigerator and little, tables and chairs, because our furniture was on its way from Canada. A local couple of painters came by. As I said, it's kind of dark inside. I'd like it a lighter color. And they came by and said, okay, well, we'll paint the whole interior of the house for $100, and you can pay me whenever you've got the money. By the time my husband came home from work in the afternoon, we had logs burning in the fireplace. We had people painting the house. We had, the lady, Mrs. Lewis, who lived across the road. She brought a big pot of chicken and dumplings, and we were moved in. That is what I want to thank. That's why I want to do this, because I wasn't related to anybody famous that day. Nobody had ever heard of my brother. He was hardly even heard of in Britain. This was the kindness. This was the kindness and the heart and the love of the people in Benton. This was what happened that day. And this is what I'm trying to repay. So if we can take this house and put it on a nice spot and use it to create an income or to create some funding, bring some economy into the area, let's do it. Let's make it into something. And then 18 years from now, when it's the power of George is. He is. And funny enough, in this very room, right about here, he was sitting on the couch with one of the guys from the Four Best, one of the guys who had been Gabe. What was his name?
McCarty's right out here.
Yeah, Gabe. What was the name of your guy that used to work in Nashville at the Grand Ole Opry?
Welch.
Yeah. He and George sat on the couch right here, and no, I've only been playing for about 5 years now, but hey, well, maybe when I've been playing 15 years, I'll be pretty good too.
It's a trivia thing. It's what you have in the past. It's like, you know, the days when you could bounce around and have a good time and listen to music and scream your head off.
It seems though, although it's been a few years, your excitement has left.
This is what's doing it to me. I am really thrilled. I really am.
It seems as though, even though it's 15 years ago.
Oh, I can hear the music. Things are coming back. Just wonderful. Yes, it is something you can see. Visually, it means a lot more to touch than to see something on television. You know, it means so much more if you can walk through something. It's like going back in time. And like Louise said, when people helped her and they came over here with potted dumplings, this is the way the people are down here.
Then there's one more you have to find.
Could you do the George? Oh, okay. The George person. Could you stand up there by the door where it says George? Sure. And I'll get you videotaping. Taped. It's a bit of a climb.
Yes, me.
Ah, that's perfect. Perfect. That's it. That's the shot. That's it. These are two of our patrons here. Cool. Okay. And that's B-E-N-N-Y. I'm glad I asked. There you go. You have a line all the way down. Hey, you did it. Yeah, that's it. Hey, Mark, you gotta do that. Jimmy there?
For Greg to help him.
Jimmy there? We're gonna do it.
Tori.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, my Right? Okay, shoot.
All right, which camera are we looking at?
It doesn't matter, all of them, I think. Okay. Beatles. It looks like he didn't know they were shocked.
Yeah, he does. The muscle man below him, you know.
I've got a picture of George and my mom and I. Actually, with our heads screwed up. Yeah.
That's great. Now he gets stuck.
Okay. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Anything more we'll take it.
Okay. Yeah, but I play a lot of him.
My little skate park.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes.
You want to go ahead and get in line, get it all over the line.
She's going to sneak on up the sneaky Pete.
That's because we just came out of a can.
With all the pictures there, you can compare how much they
Yes, we do. We will take the stand.
Guy was sitting down for breakfast, his wife was laughing, and he said, "What's that for?" I found this girl's number in your pocket. That's my girl's number. And I said, "Yes, where's that number?" And that's thanks to that again. We're came back, sat down, right flat.
I know, I'm just waiting.
Don't make my hair, but I want you to see that. Why did they take the dogs on a fire truck? What did they do? Don't kill me.
I believe it. Yeah, this guy.
Okay, you may have done. In Florida, yeah.
Yes, I did. I think I did.
He normally wears his hair like long and look. I have lots of.
Well, I think it was your dad's stuff. If I remember right.
Oh no, that was Gordon.
Oh, Gordon.
That was my other grandson,
Yeah.
Robert. Yeah. Take a good use of the shirt.
Yeah.
I'm just eating it to like all.
Turn around, you're on video.
So, hey, Karen.
Break down.
It's truly an honor and a privilege to be given the opportunity to stand before you as your master of ceremonies for this solemn and historic event. Mr. Jim Kirkpatrick was very instrumental in arranging this event, which could turn into an annual observation of the George Harrison visit. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Mr. Darren Galloway. He's a Benton resident who spent the better part of a day putting together a soundtrack, and he's running the sound for us here today. Almost 7 years ago, it was late January in 1995, I received a phone call from Bob Bartel. He was rather frantic. He's from Springfield, Illinois. He's a detective by trade and very avid Beatle fan, and had noted that the Department of Mines and Minerals was going to demolish the house that where George stayed in 1963 for a parking lot. And as the president of the Franklin County Historic Preservation Society, we had a track hoe lined up to go ahead with that demolition. And we made some phone calls. Several people were involved in that, and Senator Jim Ray at the time was able to put a hold on the property until we could actually determine what we had, what could be done with the house. And it took a lot of courage at that time because, believe it or not, it wasn't the popular thing to take a stand for the preservation of this house. And quite honestly, we really didn't know what we did have historically. But Louise came, Darrell Chady, one of the owners of the bed and breakfast, called, and Louise came from her Florida residence, and she stayed at her house for several days during that winter. It was a very cold winter. And with her, she brought a small shoebox that had some old Super 8 videos from, you remember the old Super 8 video cameras from 1963, which her brother George, when he flew into Lambert, brought a camera or purchased a Super 8 camera. And it was an excellent their personal property of the Harrison family, but had documented George's stay. And George was a part of our heritage, not just for Franklin County, but for all of Southern Illinois, from Lambert Airport to the El Dorado VFW, from Fenton's Music Store in Mount Vernon, all the way down to camping at the Garden of the Gods. And when you saw the young George Harrison full of energy, he had already completed half of his BBC recordings, was preparing to play before the Queen of England, and had acquired so much fame that he couldn't even leave his apartment in England, came here and must have been a culture shock to see the cars driving on the wrong side of the road, and the fickleness of human nature to people who would not give him the privacy that he so cherished in later life and was treated as a normal person. In fact, he would get up and, as I understand it, he'd walk down to the corner gas station and buy a soda. He loved the cars. He went to the old Tyler Hottenson building. But that epitomizes the history, the heritage. The first impression, the first Beatle to set foot on U.S. soil was George Harrison. And he flew into St. Louis, and he came here to Southern Illinois, to Benton, to Franklin County. His first images, and the last time, George always referred to being caught up in the eye of a storm. They said we all have 15 minutes of fame, and that's probably quite enough. And but the time that he was most at peace, the time he rested and could reflect on his life, took place here. And if spirits are able to travel about and be at ease, I'm sure that would be here. And I think in years to come, this very visit of a member of what was voted as the top icons of the last century will be a part of our heritage and something that is a priceless treasure for all of us as Southern Illinoisans. What we're going to do tonight, if I'll give up the microphone, we're going to have a in a moment here we're going to be led by prayer, and it'll be set our minds for this ceremony that we're about to have. And then we're going to be led in song. Then we're going to have a city proclamation by the mayor. And then we will have comments from those who knew George and special guests. Then we have some Dr. Joseph Resnicar, who will perform classical guitar. And also Captain Mark Brown, following his leading us in prayer, will have lead us in a song which we will all sing together and some music. But Mr. Rick Linton is a member of the Egyptian Combo. He'll tell the story. He has a job in West Frankfort, so he's getting ready to leave. I don't know if his brother Doug is here, but they were the top 10 with the song Gale Wind, and they actually refused to let George Harrison sit in and play with their band. So I'll let him talk.
Of course, this is about George Harrison. It's not about us, and we missed a wonderful opportunity back then. Although Gabe and the guys took full advantage of it, we grew to love his music and the Beatles' music, and particularly what George stood for. And after I got into tourism a few years later, I really understood how beautiful Southern Illinois was, and have George Harrison associated with the beauty of Southern Illinois is quite an honor for all of us, because he really took, he enjoyed it, and he enjoyed being here, and he noticed the beauty. Some of the things that he stood for were things that were close to our hearts too. He is for the preservation of nature. He wanted to protect nature. He wanted to protect human rights, and these things, I really felt that a kinship with him, although we weren't, didn't have the honor of really knowing him that well. We did get to know Louise in the last few years, involved with tourism in this particular project, and that's been quite an honor too. And we're going to sorely miss him. We think that music will live on forever, and we really glad to be a part of this tonight, and thank everybody for coming out. Thank you.
You know, our history's been preserved in several ways. We have it preserved in the flesh, in Louise and her family, still living in Franklin County, and then with the structure itself, but most importantly in the Word. Mr. Jim Kirkpatrick Rick is the author of the book Before He Was Fab, and as I stated earlier, he was very instrumental in organizing this event, and purely from his heart became involved in this project from the beginning, and felt the energy and was compelled to document. During this one time, I remember he called and we were talking about what movie George saw when he went to the drive-in, and Jim had discovered that it was The Nutty Professor. I was so excited to learn that it was Jerry Lewis and The Nutty Professor. So introduce Mr. Jim Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. I'd also like to mention, before I get started, that there are some books on the steps of the house that we encourage you to sign, and they will be sent on to the Harrison family. When Beatle George Harrison died last week, word of his passing captured the top of the charts and all the media markets throughout the world. And just yesterday, I went into a local bookstore and I saw probably about a dozen magazines, and all of them had George Harrison's picture on them. That's quite a commentary for a man who really didn't seek fame, but just wanted to become successful. So today, as we gather here, ironically on the 21st anniversary of John Lennon's death, we would like to pay our respect and show our appreciation to George Harrison, a singer, a songwriter, and a humanitarian. Benton and Southern Illinois should be very proud that the first Beatle to set foot in the United States was George Harrison when he made his trip to his sister Louise's house in September of 1963. There are so many interesting stories and warm remembrances of that visit. Yes, I know that George may no longer be with us physically, but he will live on and on forever in his songs and in his music.
I'm going to give you a couple of clues so you can guess the identity of our next speaker. She was in New York City in 1964 and sat in one of the first few rows of the Ed Sullivan Theater to listen to the Beatles. She sat in the dugout at Kaminsky Park when they played, and this is as close as we will ever be to a Beatle, Miss Louise Harrison.
Thank you very much. These things are always way too high up for me.
You know, talking about George staying in the background, well, with having me in the family, being a Leo, there was already a Harrison who was always wanting to be up front. And I remember when he announced to me, I was standing beside Olivia, and he said to me, patted her tummy, and he says, "We're going to have a baby in August." And then he looked he said, "Oh," he said, "You're in August, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, he's going to be a Leo." And then he looked sort of horrified. "Oh, my dear, do we need another Harrison that's a Leo?" But anyway, I know there was an occasion with Danny when Danny was about 4 when they took him to, he was something going on at his school. I think there was a magician or something. And George managed to creep in the back of the room of this kindergarten school, tried to sit there very, very quietly. And then the magician asked for somebody to help him. And Danny, of course, being a Harrison and being a Leo, was like, "Pick me, pick me." And of course, his daddy is trying to fade into the shadows. But that's been the difference between my brother and I, and now Danny. But anyway, one of the things I'd like to mention is that a thing that my daughter told me, which I hadn't heard on the news, but I thought was very significant. As we all know, the last few months have been taken up with horror and terror and war and anthrax and killing and violence. And the day after my brother died, somebody remarked that for the first time in months, the news was dominated talking about a very, very wonderful and peaceful and kind man. And for the first time in months, the news was pushed into second place, the news of the war and the violence.
And I thought, even if he'd never accomplished anything else in his life, that was quite an accomplishment. Incidentally, when I did see him last in Staten Island a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to him about the house here and telling him, you know, how very proud all the people in this town are. The fact that, you know, they have a little bit of reflected glory from having been the place where he first came to visit the United States. And he sort of smiled and grinned and said, well, you know, that's nice. I told him, too, that there's going to be, I think in the year 2013, if I'm correct, that there's going to be a historical marker put on this house to commemorate his visit. And one of the things that I was, when I first, you know, when this whole thing first started to save the house, I was a little bit, you know, okay, this is a bit silly, because he was only there for a couple of weeks. But, you know, as time went on, I realized that it was something significant. And then when they came out and said, yes, they're going to put a historical marker here, I started looking at historical markers throughout the country as I was traveling back and forth. And I realized that most historical markers that are out there throughout this country and many others are commemorating where one bunch of people slaughtered another bunch of people. And, you know, with a touch of whimsy, I thought to myself, well, you know, maybe that we're coming to the 21st century, maybe humanity is evolving to a point where we now have become sufficiently civilized that instead of always commemorating slaughter and bloodshed, we now can commemorate a very, very kind, decent, loving and gentle young man who gave the world only love and kindness and beautiful music. So, you know, maybe we are progressing. And with regard to what my associate Mark Brown said about the different religions, this again, as we all know in the last few months, is one of the things that has caused the most awful, awful things throughout human history, is this whole thing about religion. Maybe one day we can start to understand that there really is only one creator for all of us. And I'd like to share with you the way George explained it to me many, many years ago. He said, the creator is not really limited by gender. But if we can imagine, to try to put a visualization, if we can imagine that the creator is a huge, mighty, powerful, and beautiful ocean, and that each one of us is a single drop in that ocean. During our lifetimes, the drop of the ocean, that individual drop of the ocean, inhabits the body. And that is the divinity within us, that tiny drop of divinity which is within all of us, that we all share, and that we are all part of that huge ocean. And when our body is no longer going to be used by us, then that drop of divinity is able to rejoin and connect with the huge, powerful ocean and be at one with the Creator again. Now, I know there's, you know, many of you have very, very different views on that, but it seems to me that that kind of view of our Creator could help to bring maybe a little bit of peace to the world. But I know it's not going to happen overnight. But anyway, as somebody said before about whether we were in Benton or West Frankfurt, I do want to say that, you know, very often the press gets a lot of things wrong. Anyway, another thing about talking about the Creator is that music has been often, personified or spoken of as the voices of the gods. And so I think that there's another person on the program here whose music truly is. He plays classical guitar, and I'm not going to introduce him because I don't know if he's next in line. But anyway, I do want to thank you for listening to me. And I want to thank you for the love and respect you're showing to my brother. And I want to assure you that his spirit is going to live on as his own spirit, of course, and also through me, because many of the things that I've been doing over the last few years and will continue to do are very, very much in the spirit of everything that my brother held dear to his heart. Thank you.
You know, Paul forgot to say 13. And George, great.
God, I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry.
You ought to write the comic cut. Oh, this is Ringer. This is no good. George, how many guitars do you actually use?
How many? Well, one at a time.
You only use one.
But I've got about.
How many have you got?
4.
4?
Yeah.
They all look so beautiful as that. Listen to everything.
I got this the other day.
Yeah. And what about this? Is a new one.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
It's not.
No?
No.
Well, we'll ask you how much it is. How about this hair now? Is it real or is it a wig?
It's the real wig.
It's a real. Is it plastic or is it? I mean, it's
fiberglass.
Real fiberglass. Okay, that's okay, George. Over to Keith.
It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Well, how's it go? Let me take you down, that's it. Yeah.
Sitting there, seeing the passers-by all stir, like he has no place to go. But there's so much they don't know about apple scrub. You've been stood around for years, seen my smiles and touched my tears. Now it's been a long, long time, and now you've been on my mind, my apple scrub. Apple scrubs, apple scrubs, how I love you, how I love you. And the pain on the step outside the stand, with your flowers in your hand, my apple scrubs. While the years come and go, now your love must surely show that without all time and space, we're together, make my apple scrubs. Early in 1963, Louise and her family made a home in the heartland. Way back home in Liverpool, her brother was in a band. Please, please, in all of their bands. Now this rocking little band, so famous in their land, was making everybody twist and shout, from Germany to France. They had plans to invade our shores, but first they needed a break. So the quiet ones came to visit his sister